Hello, welcome to this event. Uh, my name is Gurumurthy Kalyanaram, GK. I'm a member of the board of MIT South Asian Alumni Association. And this association is a community of alumni from South Asia, MIT alumni. Our purpose is to connect our alumni back to the institute and institute to the alumni and with each other. Today's presentation is about MIT. Over the last 2 decades, the online learning and teaching has become pervasive, and MIT has been a pioneer in this. About 2002, MIT started the open courseware, where you could access all the material, teaching materials and the learning materials. Over the last year and a half or two, because of the pandemic, the online ecology, learning and teaching, has become very pervasive, very deep, all over the world. And one good outcome, which MIT wanted when it started in 2002, open learning, is democratization of quality education. And that has come to fruition to a certain degree. That's great news for the society as a policy. However, it raises another important question. How does MIT, a place like MIT, bring its magic, its excellence, its niche, its uniqueness to learning and teaching environment? And that's an important question. And MIT has been able to do this very well. The last year, that is the students that entered in September 2021, about a month and a half back, that was extremely competitive. 32,000 applicants and 4% admission rate. And 32,000 was an increase of 66%. So even though the last year was all of it online, or most of it, the interest in MIT has not only been sustained, but has grown over time. So it's an important question. And Professor Krishna Rajagopal of MIT, he's the acting vice president of learning, MIT Open Learning. He has been the dean. Of course, he's a professor. He has talked to several of his colleagues. So he has experience, insights, observations of where MIT has come from and what the future looks like. So we would be very, we will learn a lot listening to Dr. Rajagopal. And as with all administrators in MIT, academic administrators, Dr. Rajagopal is a distinguished scholar and a teacher. He is an eminent physicist, a doctoral alumnus of Princeton. A word or two about the audience. More of you will be joining, but essentially, Dr. Rajagopal, we have learners and teachers from Nepal, University of Nepal, Dr. Arjun Karki, Dr. Rajendra Gishing, Dr. Karki, I think the chairman of the board. We have faculty and learners from various institutions in India, National Institute of Technology, Bellu Institute of Technology, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, IIM, Kurukshetra University, various places. We have folks from Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Japan. I see some of my friends. So we have a very heterogeneous audience. And thank you for taking your time, Dr. Rajagopal. It's all your web space, digital space. Thank you.
Thank you very much, GK, for that kind introduction, and thank you to everybody for joining. It's a pleasure to meet with you, organized by the MIT South Asian Alumni Association. Thank you for organizing this. I know that not all of you are alumni. Some of you are educators from South Asia. I'm going to speak to MIT alumni, but in the Q&A we can certainly generalize. But I'm going to speak to imagining that I'm speaking to an audience of alumni who have been here. and that's important to a lot of what I'm going to say, is what does it mean to come here? You see, at MIT, we are first and foremost a residential university. We are very proud of the education that we offer to our students, whether they be undergraduates, master's students, PhD students, but to our students who come here to our campus, and we're proud of the education that we offer them. So for us, like for every educational institution on the planet, it was a big shock in March of 2020 when the pandemic hit. Starting on March 30th, all of us here were at home. Students were learning remotely, faculty were teaching remotely, staff and faculty were working remotely. And then that was spring of 2020. And then for fall and spring of the most recent academic year, fall 20 and spring 21, most undergraduate teaching and learning was done remotely, even though there was a small fraction of our students who were on campus. So if I had met with you, let's say a year ago, what we would have talked about is how did we pull this off? How do we manage to pivot from being a residential university to this crazy mode of teaching that we were forced into by the pandemic? I'm not going to take that framing today because we are hopefully moving beyond that. Right now, we are in the act of resuming in-person education. This semester, we have all of our students here on campus. We have normal number of students on campus. Almost all of our teaching is being done in person again. So it's time now to look ahead, not to describe how we managed to get through the pandemic, but I want to look ahead in a way that asks how can we benefit from the past 18 months. I also want to look back and ask what magic did we lose by not being here in this place on our campus together. As a residential university, very proud of what we offer here. We often use the phrase, the magic of MIT. We speak about the magic of MIT. Now, I grew up in Toronto. If I were a professor at the University of Toronto, we could talk about the magic of the University of Toronto. I was an undergraduate at Queen's University in Kingston. We could talk about the magic of Queen's. Someone who is from IIT Madras can talk about the magic of IIT Madras. This phrase, what it refers to is why is it, so again, speaking from MIT, why is it that our students come here? What do they get by coming here to this place? And I will admit that most of the time when we use a phrase like magic of MIT, we don't really think about it. We don't ask ourselves, what do we really mean? And one of the things that has happened in the past year is because we lost a lot of that magic, I just struggled to maintain some of it. We have much more asked what actually is the magic of MIT than we typically do. So the framing for today that I want to use is to ask, is it possible to use some of the things we've learned how to do in the past year, the digital delivery methods that we've learned in the past year or in the past 20, but in particular in the past year and a half, in the new normal in the future, can we use what we've learned to enhance and increase this magic, the magic of being here? And how can we do that? So this, I think, is the really big question for us here at MIT for the coming year and beyond. How can we use what we've learned about digital delivery, which we were forced into for the past 18 months? How can we use that as we come back together and interact in person again? How can we use what we've learned to make more space for more magic? And I want to emphasize, look, I'm the acting vice president of Open Learning. We have a responsibility for a lot of what MIT does online. But MIT is fundamentally a residential university. And nobody here, not the students and not the faculty, nobody here wants to teach or learn the way we did last year. But the question is why? What was missing? What's the magic that was missing last year? And how do we, even though nobody wants to teach the way we did last year, we actually learned a lot last year. How can we integrate things that we learned into our new normal in ways that make our new normal better than our old normal? How can we use what we've learned to save time in person for engagement and interaction? And maybe those really magical moments of new understanding or new discovery or new invention or new creation. So I'll be looking ahead, but I'll also be looking back, but looking back with this specific question in mind. So in sort of thinking about answering this question, I want to start with two sort of intangible points that are very important, and then I'll get more concrete. So the first intangible point, and I think this generalizes beyond MIT, but I will speak for MIT. For the past 18 months, the faculty of MIT have focused on pedagogy with an intensity that I've never seen in my 25 years at MIT. And there's a very good reason for this. But I think regardless of the reason, this focus on pedagogy will yield dividends for us going forward. The reason is that all of a sudden, starting in March of 2020, you couldn't just teach the way you did last year. For too many of us, when you go to teach your class this year, you say, oh, I'll do it the same way I did last year. And last year you said, I'll do it the same way I did the year before. And the year before, the same way, and that was just impossible because you couldn't. And so what that means is that people like me, I think about pedagogy and education and learning. I try to do it all the time, but most faculty don't. They teach and they teach well, but they're teaching the same way they did before, and they're not thinking about how they're teaching. And this pandemic situation forced us to go back to first principles and not just ask, what content do I cover? Everyone asks that all the time. What course am I teach? So what content do I cover? But that's that should not be the first question. The first question is, what are my learning goals for my students? What do I want them to learn? And how can I help them to achieve those goals? And since the answer to that question could not be do it like last year, people went back to thinking about that. And I think that was really very good. There's been more focus on how to teach than at any other time in my career. More willingness to think about pedagogy and more willingness to try new things because you couldn't do things the old way. I'll just tell one story. So at MIT, we have, this started in April of 2020, we have what we call the 8 a.m. call, that's internal speak. For a number of weeks in April, it was actually every day of the week at 8 a.m. Now it's more like once every 2 weeks because we're sort of getting into a rhythm. But it's at 8 a.m. on whatever day it is, and it gathers together about 200 people. It's the distributed leadership of MIT. It's department heads, it's committee chairs, it's senior staff in a whole variety of offices. It's deans, it's the provost, it's the president, but it's not the senior leadership. It's a distributed broad leadership. Associate department heads, lab directors. And so that's an amazing group of people. And I would say between middle of April and end of May, we, in that 8 a.m. call, spent probably 5 entire meetings bringing sure why the recording was paused. Okay, there we go. But so we would bring teachers in, from individual faculty in, to talk about how they were handling this crazy situation. And we would have this group of 200 people spending an entire hour discussing pedagogy. How are we doing this? And the fact that the entire distributed leadership of MIT gathered and spent hours discussing pedagogy has never happened in my history as an educator. This has to have good consequences going forward. And then the second intangible thing I've already mentioned, we went back to ask ourselves, what is the magic? Why is it that people come to this place? Here's my answer. The magic comes from unscripted engagement, and unscripted engagement of 100 different kinds, and unscripted engagement between students and faculty, but even more so between students and students. And I'm talking about unscripted engagement that's part of the academic experience. There's also, of course, all the unscripted engagement that's part of the student life. That's important too, but it won't be what I'm talking about today. So on the academic side, it's not the lectures that bring people to MIT. That when I was a student, that was the case. You had to go to Queen's University to hear those lectures. The lectures that I listened to when I was a student. That's not true anymore. You can watch great lectures on YouTube from places all over the world, including from MIT, or on OCW in the case of MIT, and all of our videos from OCW are on YouTube. we have to accept the fact, we faculty, that in fact students like watching lectures on video. They can watch us at twice the speed or half the speed. They can rewind, they can fast forward. They control their intake, their input of material of lecture style material, just as they control their input of everything else on video. It's the way students interact with the world. So they don't come for lecture. So what do they come for? What's the magic? Well, it's the question and answers after class. It's the office hours. It's the discussion back and forth in a 10-person class or a 15-person class. MIT teaches about 1,200 classes per semester. Something like 3/4 of them have less than 15 students. We have large classes also, but it's those small classes which are not lectures, they're discussions. It's students working together, late into the night, wrestling with a problem set together. Or on projects in labs, practicing a performance. In the literature class, maybe you're rehearsing an act from the play that you're studying. It's the undergraduate research experiences, labs, makerspaces, and learning together to solve problems. And the together is the important thing, and together includes instructors and students, or students and students. I'll just give an example from my own teaching. When we teach introductory physics, we don't lecture anymore. We've moved the lecture component online. So what do you do in the classroom? Well, I'll describe to you sort of say a 20-minute chunk of classroom time. You, the instructor, spend 2-3 minutes bringing back into memory something that they've all watched on video in the previous few days, a concept. And then you throw a problem at them. And they work in groups of 3 for the next 5, 6, 7 minutes. And during those 5, 6, 7 minutes, you, the instructor, are circulating among the class. And you're looking over the shoulder of groups of 3. When I teach this class, I might have 60 students in the classroom. They're in groups of 3. And you look over their shoulder and you ask them questions. Why did you do that? Why did you consider this? And you move among the groups. And then 5 to 7 minutes later, you can see on the whiteboards that most have gotten it, but you've also gotten a sense of what the misconceptions were. And then you, the instructor, spend the next 5 to 7 minutes debriefing. And you make sure that you've reviewed the correct answer, yes, but actually much more important is that you review the misconceptions. And if you think about that sequence of 20 minutes that I just sketched, it's different every time. It responds to the students. The students contribute as much to it as you do. It's active learning, it's not passive. There's an intensity to it. Everyone is working to understand. The students are working to understand the material, and you're working to understand your students and respond to them. That is part of the magic. That's a very small piece of magic. You know, working in an undergrad lab at the frontier of knowledge is a much bigger part of the magic. But all of these different kinds of engagement, that's the magic. And it's not scripted. It's different every time. So this is what we are all itching for right now and getting back to. And I have to say, walking around campus now, it just feels great. The place is alive again. And the people are just so happy to be back together. So with that as preamble, how can we use what we've learned to make MIT even better in the future? And that is the goal. And this is a really big question, and it's a question that I don't think we'll have the best answers to for another few years, because we will have to live this new normal to come up with the best answers. So, but I'm going to give you a couple of like small answers and then return to the bigger question. So the first small answer is Zoom is with us forever. We're not going back to a world without Zoom, but we have to think how to use it. And one of the best ways of using it will be bringing in guest speakers. Including alumni, by the way. When you're teaching a class in the past, you might say, oh, the world expert on this particular area of physics is at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research in Mumbai. But you would never call your friend at TIFR and say, hey, can you fly to Boston to teach 1 hour of my class? That would be inconceivable. Just think of the waste of time and effort. That your friend from TIFR has to spend how many days of their life traveling from Mumbai to Boston and back to teach 1 hour of your class. That's inconceivable. Now it's easy with Zoom. You bring them in and you have them teach an hour of your class. And this is a good use of Zoom because it will allow MIT students to engage with experts, alumni, whoever they are, in a way that would have been impossible without Zoom. So it's not the magic, it's not the in-person engagement, but still, if I've got a colleague in Mumbai who is the best person to explain something, and they're willing to spend an hour meeting with my class, let's just do it. So this will be part of the new normal and is an improvement. We get a second easy to think through example, and that's office hours. So what are office hours? Office hours in the old days, I'm in my office right now. This is my physics office. It's not my vice president's office, it's my physics office. Physics books behind me. Blackboard to my left. I would have office hours when I'm teaching in class. 2 or 3 students would come, and me and those 2 or 3 students, we would spend a great hour together, and it would be really a valuable part of their week. But it was only 2 or 3, because it's kind of, if there's a significant activation energy barrier for the student to walk all the way across campus to come to my office hour, and maybe some of them are scared of coming into my office, which they shouldn't be. I'm very friendly, but you have to acknowledge the fact that some are reluctant. Now, what we discovered with Zoom is that if I have a Zoom office hour, it's not 2 or 3 that come, it's 20 or 30. It's much easier for students to come to Zoom office hours. They come, they drop in, they ask one question, and then they leave, or they come, they drop in, they ask one question, they realize that this question from the next student is interesting also, and they stay. But it's easier, they're sitting in their dorm. So Zoom office hours are good. But they're not as good as for what happens with the 2 or 3 students in your office in person is magical. And so what we will need is a mix of in-person office hours, because that's where all of you who were students at a place like MIT, or for me, Queen's University, you have these memories of this moment where you were sitting talking with a faculty member and something really clicked, and it sticks with you for the rest of your life. That doesn't happen on Zoom. That happens in the person's office. So we need a mix of both. So one of the challenges going forward will be to mix Zoom office hours and in-person office hours. The last easy one I'll mention is chat. So there's a Zoom chat. I can look at it right there. And you can start putting questions in the Zoom chat, by the way, for when we get to Q&A. Zoom chat has been a positive feature of Zoom class. Zoom class were terrible. We're going to get away from it. We're back to in-person. But Zoom chat was actually good, because if you have 50 students in a class, or you leave apart 200 students in a class, there are many students who don't like to raise their hand and ask a question. There's something about psychology. Yeah. But the same student who won't raise their hand and ask a question seems more willing to type it in the chat. And so what we discovered during the pandemic is that with Zoom chat, students will type questions, and you have a TA watching the chat, and then the TA stops the professor and says, there's 2 really good questions that just came in the chat. And then the TA repeats them, and then you start a discussion. And that interruption has been good. So one of the questions that I don't know the answer to is, should we reproduce that in the new normal? It's actually the technology is trivial. You can use Slido, you can use Slack. It's easy to reproduce this. The problem with doing this is that then all your students in class, it becomes legitimate for them to have their phones out and they're doing stuff on the phone, because they might be typing a great question in the chat, but they also might be just talking with their friends in the dorm. So the question is it a good idea to reproduce this back channel communication when you have people all together in person? And some faculty are trying it, and we'll see what they think. Okay. And then, those were small answers. The big answer really is that students have told us throughout the pandemic that what they value is the engagement, and not the long uninterrupted video lectures with huge slide decks and no engagement. So those of us who've paid attention to the science of learning already knew this. But now everyone at MIT understands this, because we've all lived through this. And so we can start thinking about doing what I described for that intro physics class in many more contexts. We can use what we've learned about building effective asynchronous digital materials like in an MITx course. So where you might have a 7 to 8 minute video, then some active questions that you have to do to answer questions to get your mind active again. Then the next 7 to 8 minute video segment, we call that a learning sequence. Have students do the asynchronous passive learning before coming to class, and then use the classroom better for more engaging experiences than traditional lectures. So problem solving in the classroom for intro physics, group work, case study discussion, philosophical debate, or maybe physics debate, projects, more discussion, more engagement, more sparking of curiosity, more focusing on motivation. And so some fraction of people at MIT already knew this, knew how to do this. And it's includes people who've been building content for MITx. It's people who've been thinking about OCW. One of the things that we've done very successfully over 20 years, not 2, is to have people in every department who are thinking about online learning, online education, how to make effective online learning tools. We've decentralized that at MIT. It's not all in my office, it's in every department. And so, but in each department before the pandemic, the people that I'm talking about were fighting an uphill battle against inertia. And now everyone has been joggled by this, 18-month shock. And there are many, many more people thinking along these lines than before. And I think the key, someone has asked about flipping the classroom, that is what this is often called. But the key to flipping the classroom is actually not the video content. It's not the asynchronous part. We actually know how to do that well. It's the purpose of flipping the classroom is to create more magic in the classroom. And every educator has to think about how to do that in their educational context. And that's what people have started to think about over the past year. And that's where I think there's a real opportunity for long-lasting positive benefits. So I've mostly focused, as someone in the chat said, in using technology to improve the experience at MIT. That is what I focus on in this talk. But it has not escaped your attention, and I was going to say this now, that at the same time, given everything I've just said, if you think through what I've just said, doing what we're doing allows us at the same time to share elements of an MIT education with the whole world. Because if we're creating asynchronous learning sequences, we can share those in the form of MITx courses. If we have recordings of our classes, of lectures, we can share those on OCW. And I should say before I get to that, there's one more use of the tools on campus that I should mention that I skipped. And that is interactive online problems. So in science and engineering classes, a lot of the learning happens by doing problem sets. And through MITx, we've developed a lot of facility to use the edX platform to build interactive online problems that reproduce that experience. We use them in our MITx courses, but more importantly for us, we use them as part of the problem set experience at MIT now. So I'm not teaching intro physics at this moment, but if I were, more than half the problem sets are done online now. And why do the students like this? They do. This gets very strongly positive feedback from our students. And the reason is that they learn immediately if they got the right answer. And in the traditional way of doing a problem set, you do your work, it's 2 in the morning, you're doing your work, and then you hand your problem set in. 10 days later, you get it back. And that's frustrating for the students because you don't know what mistakes you've made. And also it means that the learning gain is much less. So in the online modality, if you're doing your problem set online, you enter the answer and you immediately are told you got it right. You go, yes, I got it right. If you get that red X, yes, it's 2 in the morning, but you're motivated to try to, you get a second chance. We always give students 2 or 3 chances or even more. And so you call your friend. Maybe your friend is next to you. You go back and watch the video sequence a second time. You catch a slip and you learn something, either small or big. And so we are using not only the asynchronous sequences before class, but also the online problems after class. And so what this means is we can, all these things that we're using online to improve the magic on campus, we can take the online parts and share them. And I wanted to end by saying that what this does, it gives independent learners and teachers new opportunities, yes. But the best case is not passive consumption of this material. The best case is where teachers and learners at an educational institution far away from MIT, maybe in South Asia, take materials like this and use these materials to create your magic the way we use it to create our magic. And so to me, the magic of MIT resides on campus. We can't reproduce that on-campus experience on your campus, but you can. And so here at MIT, we are all so happy to be back together, creating our version of the magic. And I think the opportunity for educational institutions or independent learners around the world, it should not be thought of as passive consumption of online materials. It should be thought of as that sets the groundwork for working together with your peers, working together with your faculty in ways that where you spark that magic on your campuses. And that, I think, is the message that I wanted to leave the educators who are here. But for the MIT alumni, the message is that we're using these technologies to make the on-campus experience even better than it was before. GK, I'll leave it at that, and we can switch to Q&A, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Krishna. That's wonderful. So that's, I think, one of the persons here asked about it, about reach, Are we talking about now enhancing the magic of MIT or reach? So you talked about the magic. Let me focus on the reach part of it, which is important for non-MIT. I mean, if we want to propagate good quality education diffusion.
Yeah.
So in your honest assessment, how far has MIT, all the materials the last couple of years and the open courseware has enabled and facilitated democratization of quality education across the world and skill development? And what do you think we could do, we in the sense, the education institution in Vellore or in Trichy or in Amritsar, they can do productively? Maybe you have some ideas, some examples.
Yeah, and so I'll say I've never taught in Vellore and Trichy, and I grew up in Canada. I will say my father was actually born in Vellore, but my father, if he were still alive, would be 92 right now, 91 still, almost 92. So my father left India 5 years before I was born. I can't speak from experience about teaching in Vellore, even though my father was born there. But so it's a very important question. And to answer Solomon, who asked in the chat, we think a lot about reach. But we think about reach in the context that I described. I don't think we can offer the entire MIT educational experience to millions of people around the world, and I won't say that because I don't think it's possible. I do think we can take elements out from an MIT education and share them with millions of people around the world, including in Vellore or in anywhere. And the elements we take out, we'd better stand behind them. If we offer a set of online problems in introductory physics, they're the same online problems we use at MIT. So they're MIT level, MIT rigor, MIT depth. But the educational experience is not the experience of being on campus as an 18-year-old working on those problems with your fellow MIT students and with the MIT instructor looking over your shoulder and asking you questions when they see what mistakes you're making. And so in thinking about reach, we have to be humble and honest. So the first thing is what I've just said, which is that what we offer is MIT quality, but it's not the whole experience. And the second thing is to say, how far have we gotten in democratizing education? If you think only about independent learners, so by that I mean people who come to OCW and learn from it by themselves, people who come to MITx learn by themselves. Those independent learners include millions of people who have never come to MIT. And so in that sense, the reach has been tremendous, but it's not the full spectrum of the population of any place, whether it's Vellore or Toronto. The people who come and can learn by themselves tend to either be people who have quite a lot of education already. We have a lot of our large fraction of our MITx learners already have bachelor's degrees or even master's degrees. They tend to be highly self-motivated. They tend to be people who, in wherever they live, already have had some set of advantages, some set of educational opportunities. We've never had the opportunity to come to MIT, and they take advantage of this and go farther. It advances their education, they learn skills, it helps their career, and it's great. But I'm not sure it fully deserves the phrase democratization. And to really achieve that goal, we need the educators in Vellore or in Toronto. I picked Toronto because that's where I grew up. Vellore is where my father was born. And you know, the way I think about it is that, first of all, we need those educators to create that in-person experience with their students. But second of all, we also need those educators to create materials of their own. The teacher in Vellore knows the students in Vellore. I don't. And it is certainly possible that the students in Vellore are not yet the students that I think, imagine a teacher in Vellore thinking about their students. They may not yet be ready to answer the problems on the MITx physics course that I helped to build. So what we need is people in Vellore building materials that students in Vellore learn from, that bring the students in Vellore to the point where they can then access the MIT materials. That's sort of an on-ramp. We need them creating the in-person engagement and the magic of the Vellore Institute of Technology. And in an ideal world, we should all be sharing. So one of the things to think about is how to build a world in which there's open coursewares from Vellore as well as from MIT. And the people in Vellore, if they are sharing their materials, we could imagine a web of materials where someone could start with content from Vellore and then add content from MIT and build an educational trajectory that uses content from both. We're far from that world at this point. And so I think there's a lot to be done, both in terms of, there's a lot to be done. And I think the best vision that I can imagine for the world involves lots of independent educators who know their own populations of students, creating materials that engage with their students, but then we can glue them all together. That's I think a very powerful vision that we still have a long way to go to realize. GK, you're muted.
I've heard you on earlier occasions mention one or two examples of these kind of on-ramp. I think examples maybe in Mexico, Brazil. So maybe you recollect.
Yeah. So I'll give you
give us some examples.
Well, I'll give you a U.S. example. I'm not sure. So in the U.S. We have institutions called community colleges. Anyone who's been to the US will have a sense of that. I'm not quite sure how to translate community college into a South Asian context, but a good community college is very different than MIT.
So just in India, they have them polytechniques, like a 3-year engineering degree, kind of.
Yeah. So we have a fine example from a community college in San Jose, California. It's called San Jose City College. And they have a program. You can go to San Jose City College and do it's their name, not mine. They call it the Tech Nest. So you spend 2 years in the Tech Nest. And the Tech Nest program from San Jose City College includes introductory material that they have created. It includes 2 online courses from MIT. It includes 1 or 2, I forget, online courses from Berkeley. It includes online material from Microsoft. And then it includes the community college, placing you in an internship locally in San Jose. and so they've stitched it together with materials they've created. And by the way, the MIT online courses, they teach them stretched out over twice the duration that we teach them. So they add extra tutorial, extra tutoring, and that to me is a wonderful example. I could give you other examples. The one you're probably thinking of, which I've talked about before, is from Uruguay. But it's similar in concept, so I'll leave it with one example.
Okay, great. One of the questions Ranu asked here and someone sent earlier, there's going to be heterogeneity in the student group, even at MIT.
Oh, yes.
If you go beyond that, then there are people who learn better in person and all that, and there's an equity issue, access to technology. So what is MIT doing in that context? What are your thoughts, reflections on that?
Good. So these equity issues were huge when our students were all distributed for last year, when they were all at home. These equity issues were enormous, and we did our best. MIT did things that took a lot of resources, and I'm not saying that other universities should do what we did, but we shipped laptops to students who didn't have them. We sent students who needed them hotspots. So if they didn't have Wi-Fi, we sent them hotspots and we paid their cell phone bills. MIT tried its best to address the equity issues that was part of what Ranu's question is, which is that you've got different students. Look, if my kid is at MIT and MIT sends everyone home, then they're in my home. And the kid in my home has good Wi-Fi, they have a laptop, they're well set up, but that's not true for a decent fraction of MIT students. And we faced up to that and did the best we could. And as I said, we expended a lot of time, energy, and money shipping technology to our students when they were spread out. Now there's a different kind of question now. Now everyone's back on campus, so we don't have to do that anymore. Everyone is back on campus, but there are still equity issues, certainly. Not the one I just said, but there are still equity issues. So I'll just say, I have to say this in a way that is completely unidentifiable. So I advise 5 first-year students this year, as I've done every year for quite a number of years. You know, we had all 5 of my first-year advisees over to our house for a barbecue this past weekend. And you know, I was talking with one of them, and she was asking, is it safe to walk from Central Square to MIT? Because I said, when you go back to campus, you can take the red line to Central Square and then walk back to campus from Central Square. And she asked me, is it safe? And so I answered the question, yeah, it's safe. In particular, there's 5 of you walking, it'll be totally fine. But then she asked me, so you don't have gangs here? So I'm not telling you where she's from, but where she grew up, the is it safe question is about gangs. So this is a kid who's now an MIT student, first-year MIT student. Her life experience for her first 18 years, very different. And so MIT has built for its students support structures for students who are first generation to college. This student that I'm describing, she is the first person from her family ever to go to university. So not only is she not used to living in Cambridge, Massachusetts, having a barbecue at a professor's house, she's, where are there gangs around here? You know, but she, you know, no concept of, there's a whole set of hidden assumptions that so many students come in. The students who went to a very well supported suburban high school in one of the, you know, affluent suburbs of New York or Washington or San Francisco or Boston or Seattle, that student understands how an academic world works. They understand a whole set of hidden questions that the student I'm describing doesn't. And so we at MIT have spent an enormous amount of effort over the past 50 years building support so that at the end of, you know, 4 years from now, all 5 of those students I described will be MIT alumni like you, GK. They're all going to be alumni, and they're going to go out and they're going to make the world better. But when they come in from very different backgrounds. Do we do this the best we can? No, we can always do it better, but we focus a lot on it. GK, you're muted again.
One of the questions is about engagement, student engagement in online environment. Do you have any insights on that? How do we enhance, and some people, the mode, online mode?
So is the question in the chat? Because I need to understand.
Yeah. We faced the issue. Issue of student engagement in online classes. Yeah.
So again, we have to break the question down, because asynchronous material is by its nature not, it's not creating student engagement. The challenge that we had for the past 18 months was with teaching by Zoom. And in teaching by Zoom, this is when the question arises, but we're not going to do this anymore. But with teaching by Zoom, how do you create an engaging Zoom experience? I talked too long, by the way. GK, we should have, if we had planned this, if we had spent more time planning today's event, we would have had me speak for 5 minutes, you ask me a question, me speak for 5 minutes, you ask me a question. I spoke for 20 minutes. That's too long. And so learning how to break up a Zoom lecture with doing student polling your students, or just having a discussion, or using a whiteboard on Zoom, or using breakout rooms, send your students into breakout rooms, have them come back. People learned a lot about how to create engagement using Zoom, but really, I think the lesson there is that when you're lecturing in a classroom, a good teacher doesn't lecture uninterrupted for 50 minutes. What's the analog of polling? Well, that we have clicker questions. That's easy to actually do. What's the analog of breakout rooms? That's a little harder, but you can do it. You can, in any classroom, you can say, let's spend the next 5 minutes discussing with your neighbor. But it's actually better if you have a flexible classroom where the chairs can move around and you say gather in groups of 3, like the classroom where we teach the intro physics that I described. So I'm not quite sure the context of the question, but when I say asynchronous learning sequences, we're not trying there to create student-student engagement or student-teacher engagement. We do break the sequences up so that the students have to pause every 5 minutes and answer a question so that their mind is active. You re-engage them, you get their attention back, but that's different than engagement. Engagement, we did our best during the past 18 months, but the best way to create engagement is in person.
Okay, so here's a question which you can read from Vivek Rastogi. 2 things. One, he says, do you kind of periodically replace with the best lectures on the subject? That's one, in the database and all that. Yeah. Second is, of course, he's asking, is there a time that something like San Jose City Community College would do even better than MIT in some small niche? Can you visualize that?
Yeah, so 1801, for those of you who don't know MIT, 1801 is intro calculus. And we do, in fact, have an entire set of videos for 1801. We have several. You can see 1801 lecture videos from one professor on OCW and from a different professor in MITx. So we have several, and if you're teaching 1801 on campus, you can pick and choose, actually. We don't replace them every year, but we do replace them. And from my point of view as acting VP, I leave it up to departments to decide when the right time is to replace the 1801 videos. And the motivations can be quite different. So in 1801 is a bad example of this, but there are many subjects taught at MIT where the subject is changing so rapidly that videos from 5 years ago are out of date, right? That's not true for intro calculus, but that's true for many subjects. So that's one motivation. The other is, you've got a dynamic new professor who's teaching in the classroom in a new way. There are lots of motivations. In terms of, will MIT use materials from San Jose City College? I hope so. Probably intro calculus is not the best example for that. But if I think about more specialized content, it's very, very easy to come up with examples. So I'll give you an example, which I think is, we can make up other ones, but this one I think is true. We have students at MIT who are interested in archaeology. MIT does not have an archaeology department. Archaeology at MIT lives in material science, in our material science department. We have a small set of archaeology classes at MIT. There's an intro to archaeology class. It's 3 point something. I've forgotten the number, taught by Heather Lechtman. It's a great class, but we don't go very deep in archaeology. What about Hebrew University in Jerusalem? I think you can learn a lot more archaeology if you're a student at Hebrew University Jerusalem than if you're a student at MIT. So wouldn't it be great if for MIT students to take advantage of online materials from Hebrew University in Jerusalem? You could give me an example in India. I don't know the right example from South Asia for real deep expertise in archaeology. I should have thought of a South Asian example. And have Heather Lechtman, the MIT professor, as I said, add tutorial content, maybe add office hours, add even labs conceivably, but have take advantage of the expertise that Hebrew University of Jerusalem has that MIT doesn't. I could make up examples like that in physics. The content would be such that it'd be harder for you to appreciate, but I could totally make up examples like that in physics also, but at a more advanced level than 1801. And I do think that we should be moving in this direction. But again, the engagement would be created by Professor Lechtman at MIT, not by the person in Jerusalem producing the online materials.
So, Krishna, two questions. They are in the chat. One by Shyamal Das Banerjee, I think graduated in early 60s. Yes. I know him from another group, MACA, MIT alumni for climate action. So yes. Anyway, he asked, does MIT provide some counsel to students going back? That's one. J. Rajashekara is in Japan, Tokyo International University. So he's saying, how can the local universities in Asia differentiate so that, they don't have the fear of winner takes all, they lose and all?
Well, I think that I'm trying to, so the second question, I hope my whole talk is the answer, which is that, I don't know where in Asia, I actually don't see the second question in the chat. Maybe they sent it just to you.
Okay. But he's from Japan, Tokyo International University. Okay.
Right. Well, actually, so for Japan, of course, there's an obvious answer that's too easy, which is that Japanese students would like to learn in Japanese. But let me use India or South Asia as an example where English is a common language of a lot of education is done in English. And what I would say is that whether it's for Japan or South Asia, it's the same challenge that we have at MIT. If all that we gave our students was sit in lecture, watch the lecture, keep your mouth shut, take notes. If that was an MIT education, you don't need to come to MIT for that. You can get it from YouTube. You can sit in your room and watch a lecture on YouTube, keep your mouth shut and take notes. You can do that with YouTube. And there's no reason to come to MIT anymore if that's what an education is. And the point that I'm trying to make is that's not what an education is. That's not education. That's watching a video. An education is so much more than watching a video. And so the challenge, whether it's for us at MIT or for a colleague in Japan or a colleague in India, is to make sure we focus on what the education is that we're offering our students in ways that we focus on what I call the magic of MIT. And as long as we're all doing that, then we're not a threat to the person who teaches in Japan or the person who teaches in Vellore. And actually, in fact, we can think about how to work together in the way that I was describing. I don't mean form a formal partnership. I mean to share materials in an ecosystem that's open. That was the second question. The first question is here. Many foreign students intend to return to their home countries. Yes. So, GK, you may know more about that, at least from your day at MIT. We have the Career Advising and Professional Development Office at MIT, which helps students as they plan their transition into their job. I would say that question from Shyama Das Banerjee is a challenge to them, which I hope they're rising to, which is I would like to hope, and I believe it's so, that our Career Advising and Professional Development Office is helping foreign students find their next steps in their native countries just as much as it's helping US students find their next steps in the US, or foreign students finding their next step in the US. I don't lead that office, so I'm not sure I can say how well they're doing, but speaking as someone who, look, I was a foreign student in the United States. I was a Canadian student in the United States. I certainly, when I started my PhD in Princeton, I was imagining I would go back to Canada. It turned out I stayed in the United States. But I hope we're doing well on that question, but I don't really have the expertise to really answer it.
So just to add to that on my Banerjee, it's MIT continues to be very autonomous, disparate in that sense, but each group doing it. The best way we get alumni get help or relate when individuals more than offices. A lot of them go back to the professors or the departments or the schools, and there's a natural connection there.
Okay, so I now realize the context of the question, the other question, which is you put it in the chat. This question of fear of winner take all.
Can I make an observation here?
But actually, I'm sorry, I'll let you speak in just a second. I want to say this fact that MIT got 30,000 applications, that's to be ignored. The reason we got many more applications, 60% more applications than ever before, is that we didn't require the SAT.
It's easy for you.
Okay. And so there are, you never know who is who, but among those 30,000 applicants, there's some fraction of them who would never have applied in a previous year because they would have taken the SAT and their score would have been too low. MIT didn't require the SAT last year because of the pandemic disruptions. There were large parts of the world, including large parts of the United States, where it was unavailable. And so the fact that our application numbers went up by 60% is not because we're more attractive. It's because of this externality. And so I, on the inside, I have to hope that our admissions office was able to do a good job of finding us 1,100 incoming students who have the skills and preparation to be able to succeed at MIT without having the SAT as one of the pieces of information. I believe they did. I believe they've done a good job, but I don't know how they do their job. It's an amazing, I don't know how the admissions office does its job, but what I would imagine, I'm a theoretical physicist, so I would imagine, speaking theoretically, that if in the past you started with 20,000 applications and then you cut it down to 5,000, and then you have an enormous amount of difficult decisions to get from 5,000 down to 1,100, I suspect going from 30,000 to 5,000 was no different than going from 20,000 to 5,000. And the real hard work of the admissions office was choosing 1,100 from among 5,000. I'm speaking metaphorically. I've never been inside the admissions office. I don't know how they do their work. I don't know what the numbers are. But the fact that our admissions numbers went up, you should completely ignore. Now, fear of winner take all. Winner can take all in the context of cheap, low quality education. If we put ourselves in the business of selling cheap, low quality education, we could probably attract a lot of people. Let me not try to take that hypothesis further, but I'm sure we could. But to the MIT alumni, you would hate to see us do that because we would just have completely killed the MIT brand. We would have completely killed what is the value of an MIT education. We would just have killed it. And so we're not going to do that. And I don't think we can offer what I would call the full MIT educational experience. Maybe we can go from 1,100 students to 1,300 students. I hope we could do that per year. But what we're offering online to millions is not an MIT education. It's content from within an MIT education that we're very, very proud of being able to share in this way, but it's not setting up a situation where those millions can get an MIT degree.
Thank you. It's time to wrap up, but
There was a person who wanted to speak. We should hear from him.
Shyamdas, go ahead. You wanted to say something.
Oh, thank you very much. This has been one of the most interesting lectures I've heard in a long time. And I'm just amazed at how MIT education has changed since my days when I graduated in '64, which brings me to the question that when I finished my graduate work in '65, getting a master's in mechanical engineering, I had no idea really what India had to offer. And this is where the real problem is, that many students just don't know how they will contribute to their own country's economy or whatever.
Yes.
When they go back. And I wish I had been connected to MIT alumni
Yes.
from India at that time, which would have then given me a better perspective and connections to what, I could use my knowledge.
I 100% agree with you. And where are you now?
I'm in Arlington, Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah.
So funny, I live in Arlington, Massachusetts, although I'm in Cambridge, Massachusetts as we speak.
Yes.
But so you gave the answer to your question, which is alumni. So Moana is here. I don't want to put Moana on the spot, but I talked with Whitney Espich, who is the CEO of the MIT Alumni Association. I have talked with various presidents of the MIT. So the president of the MIT Alumni Association, that's a role held by an alum for 1 year. The CEO, that's Whitney's, is a continuing role. We certainly need to connect our students with our alumni for many reasons, and you just named one of them. I will say, from where I sit, I'm not in a position to act on this, but I totally see the importance of it. And I don't know, Whitney is not here. I'm not sure how well we're doing on this. I can't really speak to the question other than to say that I fully agree that it's an important question.
Well, I will follow up on this with Whitney to see if, the Alumni Association in India, I know there's now chapters in Delhi and some other places. So maybe they can help in this, because, people go back and they flounder. They just don't know what to do. And although I was trained as a mechanical engineer specializing in heat transfer, I ended up teaching operations research at the Indian Institute of Management, Calcutta, as an assistant professor. So you can see, well, that's the beauty of MIT education. It helps you to tackle what you never studied, complex problems. And anyway, thank you very much.
That's great.
Shyam, there's a couple of things. One is the MIT alumni in Bombay, in Delhi, in Bangalore are very active. There's a very active group in Pune. They're really very engaged. And over the last, I think it's mid-1990s, that's about 25 years old, there's something called MISTI, MIT India program. So they go there, work and all that. There is D-Lab, which is really a 20-year-old, and they have a lot of initiatives in India. So compared to even the time that I was there, which was much later than yours, that is, I graduated in 1989, for the last 20 years, there's lots of going back and forth, information, ideas and all that.
Yeah, and MISTI has gone from 0 to probably half our students participate in MISTI, undergrads. D-Lab also, it's grown over the last 20 years, as you said. And so one of the answers to this is to bring alumni into contact with our students, and the other is to give our students international experiences. Thank you, GK.
Thank you all. Thank you for coming. Our next event is on November 16th on sustainability. Another thing I wanted to give a plug about the association is thanks to Ranu, our current president, who sort of conceptualized it. We're working on a history of South Asians at MIT. Way back, the first person to attend was in 70, 80 or something. So Shyamdas and others, if you're interested, please, you can go to the website and get some information. That's great. And join us. Thank you all. Have a delightful day, delightful evening, wherever you are. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, good afternoon.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shandas. Thank you. Bye.